This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 1035, recorded on Wednesday, October 29th, 2025. TWISOWEEN 2025. Hi everybody, I'm Blair Basdrich, and tonight we're going to fill your head with whale poop, rats versus bats, and walkways in the sky. But first, disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. Do not adjust your TV sets. Do not adjust your podcast audio. It is just me tonight. Kiki and Justin are mere ghosts, vapors, memories of what they once were. Just kidding. Kiki's traveling, Justin's working, so it is an all Blair's Animal Corner, hopefully spooky edition, tonight on This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, TWIS minions. Good science to everyone in the chat room. Good science to everyone listening at home, on the go, at work, while you do your laundry, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining me today, tonight, whatever time it is that you are watching or listening to This Week in Science. On tonight's show, we have just some Blair's Animal Corner for you. I'm even going to play our songs back to back here. I'll get you right into the Animal Corner in just a minute. I have, as I mentioned, whale poop. I have rats versus bats. It's pretty spooky. And I also have walkways in the sky. Pretty eerie. As we jump into the show, I want to remind you that you can subscribe to TWIS on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube, Facebook. That's how we are kind of aware of who's interested in the show and who's paying attention. So please do that. Get your friends to subscribe as well. Do it everywhere, man. If you have all the different platforms, subscribe on all the places. Just search for This Week in Science, or you can visit twis.org and click on any of the buttons you may find there. Now it's time for science. And since it is an all Blair's Animal Corner episode, let's get into it.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
Should I ask myself? What you got, Blair? I'm so glad you asked, Blair. Yes, thank you, Aaron Lord asked me. What you got, Blair? Well, I want to start with whale poop. Whale poop. It's important, as you might expect. Save the whales. We've been talking about it at least my entire life. It's kind of how environmentalism, very early days of environmentalism in the 70s, lots of people talking about saving the whales. It's because they're this charismatic megafauna that people can really notice when they start to disappear. And whales, they have had a hard time for a bunch of reasons, one being biomagnification. So if they eat a lot of animals that have pollutants in them, it builds up and up and up in their system. And so that's actually one of the ideas behind what might cause beachings. We also talked a couple weeks ago about how beachings might have something to do with Alzheimer's, which also could have to do with toxic algae. So whales have been a kind of a focus of conservationists for a long time. But as they disappear, as they are endangered, as you can imagine, they might have an impact on their environment. And your first thought of how they might have an impact would probably be that they're not eating anymore. And so because they have to consume so much, they might actually have this big negative impact on the ecosystem because they're not eating, which is true. But I'm here to tell you the biggest problem with losing the whales might actually have to do with losing their poop. And once you start to think about it, aside from it being kind of gross, it also kind of makes sense because they are delivering nutrients to the ecosystem. They are taking plant or animal matter and they are converting that into its basal elements that you usually find in animal poop, like nitrogen and phosphorus and all sorts of other things. And so they're delivering that back into the water column. And so if you don't have them doing that, not only are they not reducing numbers of plankton or fish or whatever it is that that particular whale eats, but they're also not converting those nutrients so that they're not as available as they should be in the water table. And so this research that came out this week in Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences looked at actually quantifying, coming up with numbers related to the nutrient impact that whale poop has. And so they wanted to look specifically at primary productivity, which on land we consider as plants, but in the ocean, there's plants, of course, but there's also phytoplankton, photosynthetic plankton. So they are doing the same thing that grass does on land. They are taking carbon dioxide and sunlight and nitrogen and phosphorus, and they are turning it into plant matter or phytoplankton that then can be eaten, right? And so that's the base of the food web. That's the beginning of kind of, it used to be more like a triangle. Sometimes it was a food chain. Now we talk about a food web. The primary producers in the food web are usually the plants or the phytoplankton in this case. And when primary productivity is high, organisms up through the food chain have sustainable food sources. So basically it's like a cascade from the primary production of organic material all the way to the top predator, essentially, right? And so it used to be a food chain. Now it's a food web. We know things are going back and forth all over the place. More on that in a later story. But yeah, so recognizing that phytoplankton is part of this important primary production in the ocean food web, how are they impacted? Where do they get their nitrogen and phosphorus? So if I'm grass, I would actually get that from the soil. And that's why sometimes we have to add fertilizer to soil, or you'll feed plants that are in a pot. It's because there's not decomposing matter nearby. It's an enclosed environment, which is not how nature normally works. And so you have to deliver that nitrogen and phosphorus directly to the soil. Whereas if they lived out in nature, like if I was a mushroom, I could pull nitrogen directly from the soil. Phytoplankton live all over the water table, but a lot of them live towards the top because they need sunlight to do photosynthesis, right? And a lot of nutrients actually trickle down in the water table. And so the top of the water table is actually pretty nutrient poor, just naturally. But that's where the phytoplankton is trying to live. And so how does this get fixed? Whale poop. Baleen whales were looked at specifically in this study. So that's minke fin, blue sea, humpback, and bowhead whales. They all contribute nutrients to the top part of this water table because they are pooping up near the top of the water table. Because they're whales, they have to come up to breathe. And so because of that, they're up there, they're breathing, they're spouting, they're communicating, and they're pooping. And so when they do that, it's getting the waste directly to the top of this water table where the nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, and 14 other trace elements are delivered via the poop. And so they are able to contribute to the food web in that way. So the research team collected and analyzed feces and urine from minke and fin whales, and they looked for these 17 different elements. And they estimated the daily and annual nutrient release for them based on this data. And then they extrapolated that to 6 other baleen whale species. Then they used an ecosystem model that they created to simulate the impact of whale nutrient release on primary production and zooplankton. They were looking specifically in Greenland and Norwegian seas and in Iceland seas, where baleen whales migrate in the summer. And so the cool thing about this is that while we don't know historic numbers, you can look at the summer when they're there, and then in the winter when they disappear, when they migrate south, south to lower latitudes. And so you can see the difference between the summer when they're really prevalent in those seas and the winter when they've pretty much all left. What they showed was that baleen whales released, of course, a significant amount of nitrogen, mainly via urine, and phosphorus and trace elements via species. They recycle over 815 tons of nitrogen and 325 tons of phosphorus per day in the Nordic and Barents Seas during feeding season. And the amount varied by species, but this is just hundreds of tons just of these important elements to survival for the food web. And so, of course, that depends on their prey consumption rates, population abundance, body size, all these other things kind of can vary from species to species and individual to individual. But when you look at the population abundance, it looks like minke whales are the one that contribute the most nutrients in the Barents Sea, Norwegian Sea, and Greenland Sea. And so the highest time they were there in August, it was actually primary production was 10% higher just due to whale poop. And other times it went way down, 4.5%, 2%. So there was still impacts because, whales were kind of trickling out throughout the months, but up to 10% of the nutrient transfer to primary production was just from whale poop. And so to make this very long story short, back to what I was talking about at the beginning, when we talk about the conservation of whales, they're a good poster child for the conservation of the marine ecosystem. It's something that we can really see and measure. Whales feel very finite. You can measure how many whales come and go per season. You can really track endangered species when you're looking at whales in a way that you can't with other marine species. Like you can look at environmental DNA, you can take guesses, you can look at fishing take, you can look at all these things and kind of guess, but it feels, there's something like more emotional almost about seeing less whales than you used to see. And so aside from that just being sad and just changing the way things look and feel, this is really describing the impact it can have on a marine ecosystem. And it also is once again reminding us how important it is to have marine protected areas and to connect as many as possible. Because even an area that you might say, that area is not very nutrient rich. Are you tracking it all year? Do you know if there are times of year where whales are coming through, they are pooping in those waters and they're providing a nutrient rich environment? And if you can protect those whales through connected sections of marine protected areas, that can also help you protect the species. And so as we save the whales, we are essentially looking to save the whale poop. And so I wanted to take a second to look in our chat room here. And so I'm seeing that, yes, it's like the Colonel's 11 herbs and spices, the 17 whale elements. Absolutely. And it's, it's how you get some delicious phytoplankton. Yes, and in Star Trek 4, when they brought the whales back, it was for the poop, obviously. Which I do believe in the movie they popped them into the Monterey Bay Aquarium or something. They put them in an aquarium, which I thought was very funny. And then, or that's where they got them from, and then they dropped them in the bay, which you couldn't put Whales in the bay. The bay is not very deep, but you know, Star Trek, they also have tricorders. Yeah. Oh, yes, and Arnler wants to know if whales are the pandas of the sea. No, we should actually save them. That's the point of this study. Their poop is important. Let's save the whale poop, and therefore the whales. All right. So next I want to talk about walkways in the trees. So if you've ever been on a trip to a rainforest, ecotourism or otherwise, you might have found yourself on a walkway through the trees, high up in the rainforest. And these walkways are often created for tourists. They're also often created for research purposes. And sometimes they're actually something that has been created for native people in that area to get from one place to another. And so they often mimic natural crossings, because if you think about it, like think about a squirrel going from one tree to another, they're going to kind of run across a limb and then jump to the next limb that's right nearby to go to the next tree, so they don't have to go down on the ground where they're vulnerable, right? And so these natural crossings that animals already use, the ones that we make that feels more sturdy, more safe, more tourist friendly perhaps, those are very similar in construction, in the goal that it achieves, as those natural versions that are just kind of like branch to branch. So all that to say, these artificial bridges have been found to be used by a lot of animals. And so this was a study from Miami University, Binghamton University, and they were looking at, this is from the biological sciences in those facilities, and they were looking at the Amazon Conservatory for Tropical Studies field station in a biological reserve 40 miles outside of Iquitos, Peru. And so they looked at canopy bridges. These are pathways connecting trees. And they found that they were being used by a lot of animals. The walkways at the field station are platforms and bridges from 6 to 36 meters above the forest floors. 36 meters that's like 100 feet. And it's mostly used by researchers and visitors, tourists, right? And they did some camera trapping, and they found that 427 species of mammals live in the Amazon, but about 227 of those mammal species spend time in the trees. Out of those, they were able to catch arboreal mammals recorded using the bridge on 41 occasions just over a 3-week period. Sloths, porcupines, opossums, monkeys, others. This is all via the 4 different camera traps. So only 4 traps. Just 4 traps over 3 weeks. So this is a very small snapshot. Mostly these animals were using the bridge at night because humans weren't on the bridge at that time. Some of those animals are nocturnal, but some of them are not. So some of them might have just been using it late in the day so that they could avoid humans. Outside of the survey period, also a sloth and a troop of monkeys were seen using the walkway during the day. And this was during minimal human activity at the end of tourist season. So they might also have seasonal differences in when they use these walkways. Arboreal mammals in general, like I was saying, the squirrels kind of try to avoid being on the ground when they don't have to. They're shy. They camouflage. They don't want to go on the ground because usually they are more agile in the trees than on the ground. So they don't want to lose their advantage. And so this helps them achieve that goal. And I think it would be interesting to see how the use would vary by certain metrics. Like you could look at the seasonality, like we were talking about. Tourist season's over. Are they using it all day now? You could also look at if we put them in areas where the trees have been thinned, but they historically were thicker, are animals going to use them more? And the thing that I think is really cool about this is we talk about wildlife corridors all the time, like tunnels under freeways and things like that. If you had more walkways that were almost identical to human walkways, but they were restricted from human use, would animals use them abundantly? And if they would that allow them to move freely, reduce habitat fragmentation, and help those animals in the wild? So just kind of a neat idea. You can picture yourself walking along a walkway 100 feet up in the air with rustling trees and mist. You can't see in front of yourself and you are walking. And then there's a sloth. I don't know, I'm trying to make it spooky. But ultimately, wildlife crossing is very important. And perhaps we've stumbled across some really good construction of them just by accident. Oh, Fada's telling me my sample size is weak sauce. Well, it was a preliminary study, just some camera traps. I can imagine this is the beginning of many, many more studies on these wildlife crossings, and perhaps an opportunity to create, like I was saying, some restricted crossings just for animals to see what that usage would be like. So this is really, you're right, it's not a good sample size. This is an anecdotal start to some kind of hypothesizing that could lead to larger studies. Absolutely. Okay, so my last story for the night is actually my spookiest one, because it entails rats and bats. Very, very spooky. Okay, so right, I'm gonna backtrack here because Vlad is making fun of me in the chat about sloths being spooky. They are. I encourage all of you to watch more videos of sloths, not just like Kristen Bell crying about petting one, but if you watch sloths and how they move naturally, and especially if you put it on mute, if you've got Richard Attenborough talking to you, that's like very, oh, sorry, David Attenborough. I've been thinking about Jurassic Park. If you turn off any friendly voices in the background, if you turn off any music, if you're just watching sloths move around, the way they move is actually quite creepy through the trees when they're hanging, but especially if you ever want to watch one walk on the ground, it is terrifying. So enjoy that for Halloween. All right, now back to the story I was going to tell you. Rats and bats. Rat versus bat. Who do you think's going to win? I'm very curious. I'm guessing most of you are going to say bat. They have the air. They have the bad attitude. They have the reputation for being scary, bloodsuckers, etc. Yeah, bat. But I have to tell you about a chilling tale of brown rats versus bats. And I'm actually going to start by just sharing this video, which I tried very hard to figure out how to do this better, but this is the best that I can do. Okay, so we have a rat. Bats are flying by him. It's not really up to much. He's just hanging out on a windowsill. Some bats are flying by, flying by, flying by. Oh my god. The rat has grabbed the bat out of thin air, and yes, folks, the rat is eating the bat. And guess what? He's taken his dinner to go. So that's right. Rats pulling bats out of thin air to eat them. For the first time, brown rats have been filmed actively hunting bats, snatching some directly from the air, and in some cases capturing others on the ground. They were caught on camera at bat hibernation sites, so as bats were coming or going from those sites. And researchers believe that the predation could be significant enough to threaten bat populations. And so this is brown rats hunting in Europe. And this is the first Google that I did because I thought brown rats are invasive, and they are. So the rats are not supposed to be in Europe. They're originally from Asia. And so they are predating upon bats that did not co-evolve with them. So that does make it difficult. They set up infrared and thermal imaging cameras to monitor the bats at 2 hibernation sites in Germany. And they were made during peak bat activity over several months between 2020 and 2024. So this is a pretty long study. They found 2 distinct hunting strategies. Some rats stood upright using their tails for balance and grabbed the bats while they were flying out of thin air. Others attacked them while they were resting on the ground, which is also crazy to me because we don't talk about that very much. That bats do sometimes rest on the ground. At one of the sites, they confirmed 13 kills over 5 weeks and found a cache of 52 bat carcasses overall. And similar remains and evidence of bat predation were also discovered at their secondary site. The kills may not sound large, doesn't sound like a super big number, but they actually calculated that even a small rat colony, so like extrapolating this into beyond what they observed, what might actually be representative of the rat population, they think they could kill up to 7% of the roughly 30,000 bats at one site within a single winter. They also occurred at a time when the bats were most vulnerable, which was during swarming and hibernation. So even limited predation could threaten their long-term survival because that's an important time that they all make it. And so it's crazy to me for a few reasons. Bats and rats are both kind of vilified, right? They're both considered to be kind of dirty and gross or scary. But I think that most people would assume that bats could take care of themselves. But in this case, these little bats are just eating bugs and stuff. They're not anything to, to fight back in this way. And rats really are invasive rats are a devastating species. For so many reasons. They carry diseases, of course, but they carry fleas, they carry all sorts of things, but they also are predators, which is another crazy thing that I wanted to bring up, is that as a child, I was told rodents are herbivores. End of story. And since then, I've become wiser. I know that mice will cannibalize when put in a tough bind. I know that mice will eat meat. I know that deer will eat meat, as we've discussed on the show. So pretty much lots of animals that we consider herbivores will eat meat when pressured. But these rats, they actually should have plenty of food. There's not scarcity where they're at. So they are looking for bats. They have found bats to be a useful resource for them, a useful food item, and they are systematically and intentionally hunting bats and pulling them out of the air, which seems like a difficult achievement. But they have managed to do it. And so it's truly wild that that these rats are able to hunt so effectively. It's wild that this rodent that's usually characterized as it's an herbivore. They just eat plants and roots and, You know, that kind of stuff. Nothing, cheese, you know? But no, they're eating bats out there. And so this is an important piece of the puzzle in bat conservation. And of course, bats are important because they control insect populations, they pollinate plants, they disperse seeds. And so rats eating bats is actually bad for the ecosystem, bad for us. It's bad for the entire kind of region. So I don't have a solution to this other than that invasive species are bad and brown rats should be eradicated. But I was truly agog by this this footage. So I wanted to share that with all of you, and now you know not to trust any rats out there. I'm not familiar with the hamster dance. Was that those weird ads? I remember there were ads that had hamsters in them. Oh yes, Ozzy reincarnated. That's right. For sure. All right. Well, oh, Quiznos. Those weren't hamsters, were they? Those ads were so strange. Well, anyway, those are all of the stories that I have for you all tonight. Thank you for joining me. Please feel free to ask any follow-up questions in the chat. I will vamp for a couple minutes here for everyone to catch up. Otherwise, I'm going to close it out. Okay. Well, I appreciate all of you for joining me tonight for the all Blair's Animal Corner version of TWISOWEEN. Oh, R and Lore, how dare you? Why no releasing of cats to stop the rats? That kind of thing always works so well, doesn't it? I can tell you that Europe has its own issues with releasing cats already for reducing rat and mouse populations. They've kind of already done that, and it didn't go well. Also, the cats might also eat the bats. It's probably a problem. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I hope that you all have a very safe and healthy Halloween. If you have little ones and you'll be trick-or-treating, have fun out there. I hope that your costumes are horrifying or adorable or niche or funny or whatever you're after. And yeah, we'll be back next week. Shout outs to Fada for help with social media and show notes, Gord for manning the chat room, Identity4 for recording the show, and Rachel for your assistance in editing and everything else that you do. I'd also like to thank our Patreon sponsors for their generous support. I do not have the list, so this is where you can imagine that I am reading your name. Thank you for everything. If you are interested in supporting us, you can find information on that at patreon.com/thisweekinscience or twis.org and click on the Patreon link. On next week's show, we will be back Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific time, assuming that Kiki can fly back to her home. Last I checked, her flight was still delayed. So assuming she can make it back in the next 7 days, we will have a regularly scheduled normal show next week on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific time, broadcasting live from our Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels. If you want to listen to us as a podcast, perhaps while you put your finishing touches on your Halloween costume, just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well. For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website. That's at www.twis.org. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, or a suggestion for an interview, please let us know on one of our social media accounts, or better yet, just send us an email. Just put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will be snatched out of thin air by a brown rat and gobbled up. We look forward to discussing science with you again next week, and if you've learned anything from the show, remember, it's all in your head. Hold on. I almost got it. Is this it?
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science.